Bitcoin has reclaimed 64K, but how long can it keep it? In today's video, we're going to be looking for clues across the higher time frames for what is most likely to occur next for Bitcoin. Welcome to Bitcoin Escape Plan. If you'd like to support my work, you can leave a thumbs up on this video or share it with another person who trades crypto. Let's get into the video, guys. So first and foremost, any 4-hour analysis that is brought to you by my membership group, the 4-Hour Break Room. You can get more information about that in the link in the description. I will talk about that towards the end of the video as well. But anyone who's already subscribed here on this channel knows that may very well be a kissing candle, my friends. We are definitely elevated above the 4-hour top Bollinger Band. It's too early to say. I will be continuing to cover this in the membership. I've already given a couple updates on this morning, and that's where I'll be talking about that throughout the day as we continue to get more information from these candles. But broadly speaking, we are well elevated to where we would have expected to be this early in the week based off of the weekly close, which is about 62.8, I believe. Actually, let's go snap over to that. We'll come back to the 4-hour a little bit later on in the videos, guys. So this is the most important trend, I would say. I've been talking about this for a while, probably about 2 weeks now, where we have this overall kind of crossover event between the daily SMA and the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP. You can see it pretty aggressively has rebounded off of it rather than continuing to trend lower. However, it is still early in the day. We still have about 7.5 hours left in the day before the daily candle closes. It's just as likely that we can get a rejection of the daily SMA as it is that we can reclaim and get above it. And conversely, the first thing that the price is going to want to do tomorrow, if it can reclaim above it, is test back below it. So I will probably close my short in less profit than I had hoped, but not really any reason for me to panic yet until we get confirmation of multiple candle closes above the daily SMA, in which case I have to be open to the possibility that we're going to head higher. So there's a couple of key levels that are going to be really important for us as we're moving through these ranges. I did put these all in the newsletter, at least for the 63, 64, and 65K levels. If we get higher than that, then obviously I'll be talking about that in the membership and here on YouTube as it's happening. But the majority of the levels that I talked about on the newsletter is 63.8 itself. As I'm recording this, we are above 63.8. We have just retested it, I believe, as support on the 15-minute time frame. And 64 is kind of where we're locked in. Now, anybody who's subscribed to this channel, you already know 64K is the most important level on the chart. It is not strange for us to continue to kind of oscillate around this level. So my apologies, there's someone playing loud music outside. Hopefully you cannot hear that. Not that I don't love Michael Jackson, but anyways, 64K super important, 64.2 super important, and then 64.4, I think the person drove away, they must have heard me, and 64.5 and 64.7 as well, very important. Past that, 65, 65.2, or actually 65.3 I think is the one I care more about. And then 65.5 and 65.7 respectively. So that's what I would be paying attention to if we continue to stair step higher. The only really thing that I think is going to allow for that is the Bank of Japan data today came back a little bit more bearish than expected. Not really sure why the price is continuing to rise higher during that, but the Wednesday news is actually the most important thing. I think what I'm going to do, guys, because my apologies for yesterday's video was way too long, I think I'm just going to talk about news narratives on Instagram from now on. So I'm just going to record those in my car throughout the day talking about the news narrative so I can keep these videos short. Leave a thumbs up or let me know in a comment if you are cool with that instead of me rambling. I would like to keep this purely just analysis. It's just there are times where there are things to talk about, and I don't really have anywhere else to talk about them. So let me know if you'd prefer I keep that to Instagram and just talk about the chart here on YouTube, which I'm totally cool with. It's the best place for me to talk about the chart anyway. So what do we have to pay attention to? Well, we've got that curve, again, that crossover event between the daily SMA and the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier. If you don't know what that is that I just said, go over here to courses. I explain that tool in more detail. The last time we saw this event was over here in March and April, and it was very similar. In this instance, we broke below it, but again, here we have reacted pretty strongly above it. So I'm gonna have to acknowledge that I may have to close my short in the short term. and will have to flip bullish again, depending on the result of the White House news Wednesday. That would be enough for us to have bullish momentum into that September 15th vote for the Clarity Act, which if they do not pass it, then the price will rebound pretty quickly to the downside. But that's broadly speaking what would allow for that 73K move that you may see other content creators talking about. So let's identify how likely that is on the monthly time frame. So first and foremost, what do we have to pay attention to? Subscribers are already aware. How many green candles do we typically see in a bear market year? Didn't mean to make that rhyme. So typically we would expect to see between 3 and 4 green candles. We've already printed 3 green candles, leaving a grand total of 0 to 1 green candles left. Now we kind of have a tough situation with this month because we closed lower than I thought we were going to. Really, we would have liked to see a July close closer to 64K because it kind of puts us in a limbo for August where we just have to fulfill the gap to 62.8, but we don't necessarily have to drop much lower than 62.8 in order to fulfill a red candle. We do not have an instance on the chart where there are 2 sets of green candles together. We have other instances where there are 2 green candles together in a bear market year, but we do not have 2 pairs. It's typically more spread out. When I was originally talking about it, I thought it was more likely that we would see a green candle for November, but kind of irrelevant at the moment if we do indeed have to print this August one higher. But that could totally flip. The Wednesday news could not be favorable for crypto and could start pulling us down. But at the moment, it does definitely look like we want to trend higher. I'm just not sure that they would want the price to rise that much before the Clarity Act. Again, unless the plan is to not pass it and then to completely rinse people. I say this in the newsletter today, but it's just really hard for me to believe that the people who bought right here that went on the week that BlackRock had a ton of inflows, that those people are magically correct and they're not going to experience any pain in the market cycle. That's hard for me to believe. Like I just don't, based on what the chart is telling me. One, the point of control has dropped lower, which means more people are buying at this cost basis. Now, there are several cohorts of individuals at this cost basis. So we have people who are buying not even at the weekly highs of 2021. These are people who literally were buying like as we were hitting the highs on the day, essentially, that it was happening. So these are like people who really are super late to the party and were behaving irrationally towards a market peak. That's our first cohort of individuals. Many of those people have sold off. They are no longer in the market, or they have become our strongest convicted individuals and have bought through all of the dips between now and then. I would imagine that is the smallest amount of these 3 cohorts personally. There's less people involved back then. We have the ETF buyers in particular, where most of those individuals are still in profits. The earliest people are still in profits, and I would imagine that those people are going to remain in profits for the majority of the cycle. If we still have the Q4 bottom that everyone is anticipating, myself included, I do still believe that. Barring, of course, if the Clarity Act passes on September 15th, then I'm wrong, like then the bottom is in fact already in. I don't know that I believe that. I don't think Polymarket believes that either. So until that changes and we see something major shift in the narrative, I have every reason to believe that's going to be a sell the news event, and it's going to propel the price lower. So again, we've got people who are in the middle here who bought after the 73.8K peak that were able to consolidate in that range. That is the bulk of the anchored volume profile. This is the point on the chart where the most human beings have pressed buy or sell. You can see it is right in those levels. Like it is, like all of these candles touch that. That's literally like 6, almost 8 months that touch that level or interact with that level. 9 actually, that interact with that level in the 2024 initial phase, again, of BlackRock trying to get people super invested in a Bitcoin product, as well as that's the first time we hit a new all-time high in a pre-halving year, or rather a halving year, at the beginning of the halving year instead of towards the end of the halving year. So that was an important part of history. I do think personally that is a big reason why we did not get 130 or 150 is because we already got a new all-time high earlier than anticipated, and then we got the more important psychological level of 100K also earlier than anticipated. So there was just nowhere for the price to go in 2025. Essentially, we had already hit two key new targets, and 126 just kind of like became the third target, but it wasn't necessarily as important as the first two. So I think broadly speaking, what we're seeing now is BlackRock, etc., is going to try and front run this move and get people excited about getting into the market. But it's hard. But these people experienced pain. Now they had to wait a while before they experienced pain, whereas the people here experienced pain pretty quickly. But these people, the earliest buyers, have still not experienced pain. So that is, again, they launched like December, maybe like early January, depending on where you're based in the world, I guess. But for the most part, the ETFs launch end of December into January. Those people, I would assume, are going to be price resilient. So the high is at 48.9K there. The low is at about 38.5. What do I say is where I believe the price can drop to, guys? Between about 34 and 39K. Probably not any lower than that. And that's, again, we may not even get that. You know, like we very well may just get to 44, and that'll be in a flash crash event, which me personally, I think is whenever the S&P 500 tops. Whenever the S&P 500 tops, it's going to correct, and Bitcoin is going to react to that, in my opinion. I don't have an exact target for the S&P. You guys already know. I'm just looking at this chart. Why am I just looking at this chart? Because I'm up like 460, 470% this year, just looking off this chart. If you want to know how I do that, go watch the video at the end of this video, the Advanced Bitcoin Trading Course. I give as much detail as I possibly can in that very long ramble. But why would I want to look at other charts when I can just continue to have a high win rate on this chart? Well, specifically just when you're looking for more variety, I suppose. So broadly speaking, what am I thinking about while we're in these levels? So again, I'm going to try and keep narrative speech to Instagram, but really the Wednesday news and the September 15th news is the only thing for me that could possibly be a bullish catalyst right now. Most of the news is bearish, in my opinion. Most of the technicals are bearish, in my opinion. That is a downtrend, guys. That's a downtrend. Best case scenario, that is consolidation, but it's not really an uptrend. I mean, the uptrend that we're talking about is a period of less than 2 months. So very, very short time to just assume that we're now going to magically head towards these higher levels, which actually let's address that now. Again, I hear people talking about between 73 to 76K. Now subscribers are already aware. I was talking about 73 to 76K at the end of June into July. We of course did not reach that. We got invalidated off of that level. It's not impossible for me to believe that. We don't have a long history of getting lower highs after initial attempts of them. You can maybe count that where February was not able to get the high and then March did get the high. But most of the time this deep into the year, we see a rally towards a high that gets rejected, and then the next rally is lower than that previous one. This is the only one actually I think in 2022 that is the inverse of that, where we have a lower high followed by a higher. I mean, it's still a lower high, just not more. See the pattern though in 2018? So we get a higher low, we get a lower high, we get a lower high, you know, like that is the pattern. We wouldn't necessarily expect that we're now magically going to get a high later after this initial run towards it in July. And again, just because of the 62.8K open/close at the month, it's hard for me to believe that we're just going to stay elevated above that rather than being pulled back in that direction towards the end of the month, meaning August is really a consolidation month more than significant chop, which I have been talking about, guys. Like for the last like month or two, I've been saying that I think this period of time is going to be a lot harder to get easy leverage trades than it was for the last couple months. I do not anticipate I'm going to make it 480% in the last part of the year. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely going to be a little bit more challenging to spot what the trend is actually moving towards, because it's going to look like consolidation. It's going to look like we're standing still. So what are the key targets that we can pay attention to that will give us evidence of this move higher or confirmation that we are indeed headed lower? I think at the moment we can dispense with talking about the lower targets, because obviously we're at 64K and yesterday we closed at 62.8. So for the moment, I think we can assume that that's not relevant to us. We can talk about that tomorrow or the next day as it becomes relevant again. So for us, that's going to be the 64K Fibonacci pivot. Now, subscribers are already aware, I never shut up about this. This is the bottom of the range we've been stuck in since the end of January, between 76.3K and 64K. Super, super important. We will return to that in a moment. We have the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP, which across time frames, we are trying to get confirmation of this tool. So on the shorter time frames, we are back above it, but across time frames, we are constantly assessing whether or not we are above or below that. The overall trend is that we are below it, that we continue to chop above and lose it. That's what has been happening. It doesn't mean it will always be that way, but that's what has been happening, is that it's continued to get pulled lower over time, and we have continued to reject it over time. Then the most important other one being the point of control. Again, that being the point on the chart where the most human beings have pressed buy or sell. This is the emotional center of the price, as I like to think about it. And it is important to note, guys, that it's getting closer to the true midpoint. The true midpoint of the October all-time high is technically 63.1K. That's 126.2 divided by 2 is technically 63.1K. So over time, the price looks like it will continue to get pulled towards that. It's already very, very close to that. So what usually happens for us at this stage of a market cycle is we get rejected off of the midpoint one more time before reclaiming it. If we just reclaim the midpoint now with only a minor rejection, it's not really enough volatility to the downside for the price to be satisfied with that. What do I mean by that? That means that we're going to get less volatility to the upside again in this cycle. That's why we didn't get a 126 all-time high, is because we pushed too high above and then we're forced to consolidate for a really long period of time. It started to get more predictable and more boring. So it's not necessarily good for us if the price starts climbing higher now and has already established a bottom at 57.7 and we're just not going to go lower. That's still not what I personally think is going to happen. I think it's much more likely that we will see some type of flash crash event in Q4 where no one saw it coming. Oh my God, the price looked great. There was every reason for it to continue going higher. Like, this happens every time, guys. Every time there's like some news story that pulled it down. Like, it didn't really matter that FTX crashed. We already had Voyager and Celsius and BlockFi and everybody else went bankrupt that year. So it didn't really matter that FTX just magically did as well. That just happened to be the important news story that they used for that cycle. Same thing as in 2018 when both sets of major ETFs failed. It didn't really matter. You know what I mean? Like the decision was already made ahead of time by the market makers, and they just needed a story to corroborate the emotion that they decided they wanted the market to experience. Maybe I'm just cynical with that, but that is my belief, is that most of this is priced in ahead of time, and you can either complain about that fact or you can profit off of the swings. I'm going to choose to do the latter, So if we are going to see a move mount towards that 73 to 76K target, which again, for me, I think 73K is more likely, predominantly because subscribers are already aware of this. When I had called out the rise to 83K, that's actually over here, in May, I called that out at the end of February, middle of February, and I called that out primarily because of a historical analysis, as well as what the downtrend anchor VWAP was telling me as the midpoint, and the point of control was telling me that we have just nobody cared about that level. There were not enough human beings at that level who had a strong emotional bias towards that price, and therefore that price can be bullied. So the major difference for us now is there actually is a lot of people who are willing to defend those prices. Now it starts to get weak at about 71.7K, let's call that 72K. So right around that same period between 73 and 76, suddenly there's not that many people that care about the price. The price wasn't at those levels long enough for there to be enough people and therefore a strong enough emotional bias to remain at that price. So for me personally, I'm still going to anticipate that that price can be bullied, that that price is not necessarily meant to continue rising, and it would be purely the passing of the Clarity Act that would allow that to happen, at which case I would have to acknowledge we are entering the 2019 fractal considerably earlier than we would have anticipated, which is quite possible. I'm sure you see a lot of channels that say the bottom is in. I don't believe that, but that would force me to acknowledge that I am incorrect about that, which does happen. I am incorrect sometimes, guys. Come on. Not perfect. I'm just a Bitcoiner that shares my knowledge for free. Like the video. Anyways, so again, we've got those three key targets. Those are the most important ones. The bottom band of the downtrend anchor view up, the 64K Fibonacci pivot, and the point of control. So what's next? What's after that? Well, structurally speaking, from the higher time frames perspective, we pretty much just have the weekly SMA, currently sitting at about 68.8K. Now, there's nothing really preventing a retest of that. Again, it's pretty normal. Subscribers already know this, what happens in a bear market year. We trend towards the weekly SMA and we get rejected off of it time after time. That's pretty normal for us to see that pattern persist. So for me, nothing structurally preventing us from rising towards that. It's just hard for me to believe that we are magically going to reclaim it and stay elevated above. And again, the only thing that can make me change my opinion about that is September 15th, they decide to pass the Clarity Act, and then all logic and reasoning is out the window. Sell your kitchen sink, go into as much debt as you can, long the living hell out of that is all I can really tell you at that time. I don't think it's necessarily going to pass. I think they're going to try and string it out longer, at which point, again, any momentum that we have that carries into that September 15th event is going to sell off, and it's going to sell off really hard. So what is the next most important level past that? Well, for me, guys, you won't hear this anywhere else, but I believe that's about 70.3K. Technically speaking, you can just call that 69K. I'm going to say that the weekly SMA is closer to that 69K target. So again, 69K being the peak in 2021, the second peak, and 68.8 at the weekly SMA being, functionally speaking, if the price halted there, that would be resistance at 69K is the way that the price would interpret that. But why I like to say 70.3K is 70.3K is roughly the midpoint of this 76.3 to 64K region. Technically, it's like 70.14. I don't care, guys. 70.3 is what I've said on this channel, so that's what I'm going to continue repeating. So how I think about it is if the price is above that, it puts pressure towards 76.3K. If the price is below that, it puts pressure towards 64K. So if the price gets to that and gets a strong rejection, what is that going to confirm for the price? That's going to confirm that we need to head back towards 64K. The only thing that would have prevented that from being a very quick drop is the point of control at 66.9K, and originally it was at 67.4K, which it may still be that on the 4-hour time frame, but regardless, I would expect that to be important both on the way up towards a 73K move, as well as very important on the way down from that move. It's hard for me to believe, guys, that we're just going to continue to carry past the weekly SMA magically, because that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen in a bear market year. We have no evidence for that happening. As well as, this isn't even worth me saying right now, but at this stage of a bear market, we do not interact with the top band of the weekly SMA, or the weekly Bollinger Bands, rather. That would be at 82.3, meaning the price must remain below 82.3. I also find it hard to believe that we're going to interact with the middle band of the downtrend anchor VWAP again. I don't have evidence for that. I don't have those drawn from older time frames, so I can't confirm that. But I do think that was our important interaction with it. We can get pulled in the direction, so I don't want to say that it's impossible for that to happen. I'm just inclined to think that it will probably get pulled lower before that we have that interaction. And at the moment, it currently looks like it's consolidating more than anything. So that would be if we get like a ton of strength off 73 to 76, but I don't see that. And again, if the Clarity Act passes, then guys, I'm wrong, and I'll be talking about it at that time, but I don't think it's relevant to us really now. I think that the 76.3K would be a more likely stopping point, and same as how I talked about 83K on the way back to May, I was talking about 83 to 86 and just had to acknowledge that 83K was resistance when we hit it. So I'm kind of anticipating the same thing here, where we very well can get support above 70K. And it may really look like going into that following week that it's going to continue to push higher and can just as easily get rejected off of 73 without getting a tag of 76 that then propels us down a lot lower. So what would be our evidence of that? Well, let's look at the daily time frame once again. So as I talked about earlier in this video, we were expecting a crossover event that would pull the daily SMA lower than the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP. Currently, we are not seeing that. So whatever the price is regarding as bullish at the moment, that is elevating the price above 64K, which again is one of those most important levels in the higher time frames, and therefore we have to pay attention to that when we're hitting it on the lower time frames. So technically speaking, we have retained, I'd call this consolidation more than an uptrend. Technically the uptrend got broken when we went down here, and we either have to redraw that uptrend or just acknowledge that we are in a period of consolidation before either continuation of that uptrend, which we would have to test. That would mean a test of the 66K level again, which now is being regarded as an important daily Fibonacci pivot, but again, is no longer the point of control. It's just as likely if those individuals change their mind at that level and they want to get out instead of continuing to buy more, it's just as likely that we get rejected off of that level as we get accepted off that level. And again, broadly speaking, downtrend, my friends. Like, that's a downtrend still. Doesn't matter what time frame you're on, that is a downtrend still until proven otherwise. So the most important thing would be, where do we close today in relation to the daily SMA? The daily SMA, again, being at about 63.8K at the moment, and 64K is super important. We've been spending, looks like about the last hour or so chopping around this level. I said it already in the membership, I said at the beginning of this video, we very well could be seeing this 4-hour candle open as a kissing candle. It's not impossible though that it closes red and then just continues climbing higher. Again, I would be paying attention to those levels I talked about earlier on in the video, 64K, 64.2, 64.4, 64.7. However, at the moment, according to the 4-hour time frame, we are showing resistance at 64.2 on both of these candles so far. So that is really what I would be watching between now and we've got 2 more 4-hour closes, about 3 hours left in this one, and then 1 more before the daily close. But the daily close, again, really it depends on how close it is to about 63.8K, and it is getting pulled higher. I mean, this interaction with the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP is pretty important, guys. Again, we were anticipating that we would see bullish momentum on the back end of a reaction. I did not expect it to literally revert before even breaking it. I anticipated it would break it. So this is potentially needlessly bullish, and it's taking money out of my hands in that short, which again, more updates about that in the membership. Down below is a discounted rate for you to try the membership for the first 3 months for $49 a month instead of the $99 a month rate. I am going to be adding new things to this, guys. Specifically, I'm going to start testing alerts on my own, and then I will send those directly to the membership once I have worked out those alerts to my own satisfaction. And just in general, anything that I'm going to later add in like newer indicators and things like that for YouTube, I will deal with that in the membership first. So again, all the details for that are down below. Everything else you need is at bitcoinescapeplan.com. And again, I think I'm going to start talking about news stories on Instagram. So if you guys have certain narratives that are popping up that you really want my opinion on, tell me about it in the comments. And go follow me on the Instagram. I'm currently not doing a ton on the Instagram, but I think that's what I'm going to try and do there, because that seems to be what performs well for other channels, is they're just yapping about the news, which you already know I hate. I just want to talk about the levels, but I have to be able to talk about those ideas as well, because they are important. So broadly speaking, what I would be looking at between now and tomorrow's video is how do we behave at 64K, 64.2, 64.4, and where is the daily close in relation to those levels, as well as 63.8. It's just as likely that we start to see resistance here. You can even see that on the 4-hour time frame. You know, we've really struggled with 64.2 before, and this would be a rejection of that. So I would also pay attention to that bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP on the 4-hour time frame, which is currently sitting at about 63.7K. So again, what I just say, 63.8 is important on the daily. If we close around there, it's probably going to want to test that 63.5K pivot again, at which point that's probably where I'm going to close my short, guys, to be honest. If we get a strong move higher, then I'm getting into the region where I'm not going to be in any profits at all, and I've just been sitting in this trade for no reason for the last couple of weeks, which does happen. It is what it is, but I think what's more likely, depending on how this candle closes, if this candle stays fairly consolidated, I would expect the next one to want to push down back one towards the upper band itself, which is currently at about 63.9K. So we would at the very least want to sweep back below 64K. I guess technically it can close way up there, but that's just going to pull the Bollinger Band higher. Again, I would imagine I will give multiple updates in the membership today, guys, just because there's something to talk about. I don't always give updates, but when there's stuff to talk about, I try and touch back in with the members over there. But broadly speaking, I would expect some bit of resistance here. At that point, I will have to pay attention to both the bottom band of the downtrend anchor VWAP and that 63.5K fib pivot, and will potentially be closing my short at that time and going long, because it doesn't really look like we need to test the 4-hour SMA at the moment. That's very low, down at 63.2, which I don't think is relevant at the moment based off of this amount of volatility. People, for whatever reason, maybe they're just front running the anticipation of the Wednesday news being positive, is what I would imagine. But there's not really a reason for the price to behave this bullishly just off of a few tags of 62.5, in my opinion. Make sure you go check your email for the newsletter. I gave a lot of this in detail over there. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the comments down below. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Everything else you need is on the website, BitcoinEscapePlan.com. See you tomorrow. Go watch the advanced Bitcoin trading course if you want to be able to profit off of trades like that on your own. Best of luck.